but I will start. We want to just share a couple of things with you. Statistics on the incidence of heart disease, just simply to give us all a common starting point as to the seriousness of this whole issue. About 600,000 people die of heart disease in the United States every year. That's 1 in every 4 deaths. I mean, that's unacceptable, I think. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for both men and women, and more than half of the deaths due to heart disease in 2009 were in men, which, not good. Coronary heart disease is the most common type of heart disease, killing more than 385,000 people annually. And 715,000 Americans have a heart attack every year. And for those, over 525,000 are a first heart attack, and 190,000 happen in people who've already had one, which means they probably weren't doing a lot of prevention. Coronary heart disease alone costs the United States $108.9 billion every year. This includes the cost of healthcare services, medications, and lost productivity. That's a huge cost, just huge, $108 billion. And this information came from a 2012 CDC report, so it's pretty timely.
Pretty current.
Yeah. Symptoms of heart disease in men. It could be chest pain alone, or when combined with chest pain and combined with sweating, shortness of breath, nausea, vomiting, pain that spreads from the chest to the neck, the jaw, and arms, dizziness, lightheadedness, fast or irregular heartbeat, and loss of consciousness. And symptoms of heart disease in women are a little less specific, meaning they're a little more vague and can kind of be attributed to a lot of other things. So many times, heart issues in women go undetected. Some of those symptoms are fatigue, trouble sleeping, anxiety, difficult breathing, and indigestion. And the best thing you can do if you suspect you're having a heart attack, chew an aspirin and call 911. And actually, you take an aspirin, and if you're with somebody who can get you to a hospital, you're really better off to get yourself to the hospital as quickly as possible, rather than waiting for an ambulance, which could take a half an hour or an hour, if you could get there quickly and safely, with somebody driving you. And one more common symptom of heart attacks in both men and women, and this is probably the single most important symptom, it's sudden death. And for many people,
it's a heck of a first symptom.
It's the first symptom and only symptom, that they have. Very dangerous.
So what's interesting,
got some good information.
What's interesting about heart disease is that it is primarily an inflammatory disease, and that's the thing we're learning. In fact, many of the really nasty diseases, even cancer, is considered an inflammatory disease. So if you'll click Joe, there was a Michael Pollan. Some of you have heard us mention him before. He's written In Defense of Food and Food Rules and Omnivore's Dilemma, and he said every culture that adopts our Western diet eventually develops our Western diseases. And so if heart disease is an inflammatory disease, what causes inflammation? Well, let's take a look. First of all, obesity. In fact, obesity is probably one of the first highest risk factors for almost every one of the nasty diseases, for heart disease and diabetes and cancer and dementia. And obesity is a huge risk factor, and one of the reasons is it increases inflammation. Number 2, click, is high-fat foods, fried foods, and foods that a lot of meat, cheese, high-fat foods. But the one that may surprise you is the third one, and that is insulin that our bodies produce in response to when we eat carbohydrates, sugar, refined carbohydrates, wheat, pastries, breads, all that.
I have one word for you, Barb. Killjoy.
Exactly right.
That looks delicious.
Looks delicious. And actually, if you've been following us on wellness webinars on Monday nights, you know that many of these foods are highly addictive, especially sugar and refined carbs and gluten. And so that's what makes it all the more challenging to make changes, because our bodies begin to crave these things. So next slide, we talk about Americans who are at risk, people with high blood pressure and high levels of LDL cholesterol, smoking, but diabetes, overweight and obesity, poor diet, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol use, many of those risk factors happen because they increase inflammation in the body. And our guest tonight, who was one of those Americans who was at risk, is Rusty Ost, our colleague. And gosh, we just so appreciate him joining us, because Rusty comes with a wonderful background of not only being a master herbalist and knowing a lot about nutrition, but he's a registered pharmacist. So he and his wife June are one of those wonderful and rare people who help us make the bridge between pharmaceutical medicine and the natural world. And so we've invited him tonight to share his story with us. And so, Rusty, thanks for coming.
You're welcome, Barbara and Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. Sometimes it's not always fun to talk about yourself, but I didn't always live in Florida. I spent all of my life in Nebraska. Nebraska is the beef state, and June and I used to eat an entire cow every year. We would order a half a beef twice a year.
Sure.
We ate beef for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever. And I grew up on it. And when I was a senior in pharmacy school, cholesterol was a sort of a new thing, because insurance companies were beginning to look at it. And so in our therapeutics class, we all drew blood and tested cholesterol, and mine was 360, and nobody really cared. I was practically the winner, and the thing that struck me odd is that it was the thin people who had high cholesterol, not the heavy people, and so. Over the years, it got as high as 480 before we got into Shackley.
Wow.
And that's sort of like having fat pulse through your veins. But anyway, since Shackley, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, I did have an event. I had a heart attack. You can't pick your parents, and you can't, the first 40 years, I lived the way I wanted. There were no killjoys in my life, Joe. And so, anyway, now I've gotten as low as 153, and I currently it's about 160. And my LDL is, below 100, and my HDL is still needs some work. But anyway, what's the next slide?
That's your story.
Click.
In March of 2000. Actually, in January of 2000, we had come to Orlando, Florida, to speak for a Shackley group in Orlando. And I woke up one morning, and we were staying with friends. Woke up one morning, and my arm hurt. And so I told June that my left arm hurt. And so she started getting on me. And so I went with my friend to play golf. And the arm pain kind of went away, but it stuck with me, and when we got home, I started to figure out what was wrong, and I ended up, after a echocardiogram and an EK and a stress test, which I failed miserably, I had quadruple bypass surgery. And the cardiologist came into the recovery room as soon as I was capable of talking, and he said, we need to talk because you shouldn't be here. And I said, why? And he said, because you should have died 15 years ago. He said, your heart blockages were 100, 99, 97, and 93. He actually pulled the 100% blockage out of the vein. They had my heart out on the table for 7 hours working on it. And so he pulled the plug out of the 100% blockage in it, and he took it out and he showed it to June, and she said it looked like butter.
Oh, yeah.
Which probably is what it was. So we began to talk about why I wasn't dead, and I told him about Shackley and about supplements, and he was particularly interested in two things, the soy protein and the essential fatty acids that I was taking, the omega-3s and the omega-6s. Omega-3s and, EPA, DHA, those types of things, and then omega-6s are GLA. And so he told me that it were those essential fatty acids that saved my life, because they make the blood cells so slick. If you think about spitting watermelon seeds, that's kind of the way blood cells get through blockages. And they would just squirt through rather than get caught and cause a problem. So I did survive. My cholesterol at the time was 228. I had lowered it quite a bit, but I couldn't make up for my past indiscretions. But I kind of liken many people treat their health like I used to treat speed limits. And if the speed limit on the interstate is 70, I drive, 75, 76, 77. And I kind of drove my cholesterol the same way. I knew it should be under 200 by that time. I was aware, and I knew it should be under 200, so I tried to keep it under 200, but I thought, well, 10%, that's not too bad, considering where I came from.
Yeah.
So Rusty, I'd like to go to now talking about how we can begin to reduce some of our risk factors, and then I want you to come back in a few minutes and talk to us specifically about some of the products that you feel not only helped you the most in terms of saving your life back when you had the surgery, but even since then, because you've improved so dramatically. So, Joe, let's go to the first risk factor.
And that would be maintaining ideal weight. And the reason for that is because obesity causes some of the most serious risks for heart disease, those being elevated triglycerides, elevated blood sugar, elevated total cholesterol, elevated bad cholesterol, lower good cholesterol, and there's that word again, causes inflammation. So it's very important to work on that, the weight. It also, obesity strains the heart. Imagine, the heart is the one muscle in the body that never rests. It must pump blood to every corner of the body to bring oxygen and nutrients to every single cell. And the bigger the body, the harder the heart must work until eventually the walls of the heart become thicker and weaker and then eventually fail. They can't do it anymore. They're total exhaustion. And so with the Shackley 180 products, we have an absolutely dream way to really help with overweight, obesity, and getting our bodies in good shape and condition. They contain an ingredient called leucine, which is in the smoothies and the bars, and that's used by the body to build and repair muscle. And the heart is a muscle, so it's helping there, but also with the other muscles. And then the EGCG is a component of green tea that the body uses to actually burn fat. And our metabolic boost, which is a great product, increases the body's ability to burn calories by 30%. And that's pretty high. And then it's sweetened with stevia, which is a sweetener that's not only safe but has its own built-in health benefits for blood pressure, blood sugar, and unlike many diet products, with saccharides that can cause bladder cancer, aspartame, which breaks down into neurotoxins, and sucralose, which metabolizes to
organochlorides. I know, but this bad stuff, So it's nice to know
all
that
sounds terrible.
all the ingredients that are in the Shackley 180 and virtually all Shackley products are all safe. And we made a particular point about this because it really isn't true of most diet programs.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about the Shaklee product. There's no artificial anything. And the chromium, Vidanium and banana leaf extract help you retain normal blood sugar levels, which again, remember, that's important for the inflammation factor. And that also helps keep your energy up and your metabolism going strong, which are all great. And one of the great things about the Shaklee program for helping to maintain weight is that it's packaged in a kit. So the turnaround kit is good for 2 meals a day. You have your smoothie mix, you have your meals in a bar, you got snack bars, energy tea mix, metabolic boost, and so everything is all right there. You don't have to figure everything out or guess about it. Then you get free web support. And then there's the wonderful program for people that could get their products free. We call it the 3 for Free program. So it's a complete package, all in one, and really works, so well for losing that weight. Here's another thing about obesity. It damages all the metabolic pathways that we rely on to control blood pressure, triglycerides, HDL, LDL, blood sugar, cholesterol, inflammation. But the good news is it is all completely reversible. And that's really good news.
Okay, Rusty, would you, and thanks, Joe. I really would love to have you talk a little bit more about the fish oil and the omega-3 fatty acids, since that was so significant in your in keeping you alive during all that time before the surgery.
Okay. To give you a little biochemistry here in a nutshell, the essential fatty acids are involved in the chemical pathway called prostaglandin synthesis. And there are several prostaglandins, but the 3 major prostaglandins are called prostaglandin E1, E2, and E3. And so E1 is a good prostaglandin, and it's the one that prevents the platelets from sticking together, and GLA is particularly good at increasing this beneficial prostaglandin. It reduces inflammation, it makes insulin work more effectively, it does a lot of things. Then there's prostaglandin E2, and it's the evil prostaglandin. It promotes just the opposite. It promotes platelet aggregation, which is where clots come from. It increases the risk of heart attack and stroke, causes the kidneys to retain sodium, leads to water retention, it causes inflammation that Barbara's been talking about. And the thing is that diets that are high in saturated fats that contain arachidonic acid, which is an amino acid it's an acid that's in meat, and it concentrates in the fatty tissues. So the better looking that beefsteak is, the more arachidonic acid it has, and that increases that evil prostaglandin E2. Then prostaglandin E3 is very similar to prostaglandin E1, and omega-3 fatty acids, the EPA, DHA, things like that, are the source of this beneficial prostaglandin. So the essential fatty acids are really important in this prostaglandin synthesis, and that's the basis for the health. As you can see on the slide, it reduces inflammation. It lowers triglycerides. I have a friend customer who lowered his triglycerides from 1,600 to 75, and they should be below 150. His were 1,600. And it lowers blood pressure. It raises HDL. It lowers LDL. All of these things are risk factors that affect heart disease. If you want to go to the next slide, Joe, you see here a picture of the finest, purest collection of omega-3 fatty acids that's available from any source anywhere in the world today. 7 omega-3 fatty acids that are ultra pure, pharmaceutical grade. You don't have to worry about mercury and lead and all of the contaminants that other fish oils have. But because the omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation, look, eczema, colitis, arthritis, MS, psoriasis, migraines. C-reactive protein is the new catch-all blood marker that physicians use to measure the inflammation in the body. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit. But the omega-3 fatty acids are really, really important for all kinds of good health in the body. And quite frankly, we just don't get enough. And if you go to the next slide, it talks about, the National Institute of Health talks about people eating, X number of servings of fish a week and things that are unrealistic because people just don't do that. And the American Heart Association, as it says, recommends 500 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids, and that's what you get in the Vitalizer strip, but people need more than that. And adding 3 to 6 omega guard a day, I think, is the baseline. I certainly take more than that because, quite frankly, I'm worth more than that. And so, in addition to my Vitalizer, I take 12 a day.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, Rusty, when I went to, I increased mine because I was told that I had sticky pattern cholesterol a number of years ago, and since I was adopted, I don't know anything about my health history, and so I started taking 5 a day. And the next time I had my blood tested, the HDL, which they want to be above 45, was 104.
That's because you're a woman.
Just from the omega. That was kind of nice. All right, well, let's talk about cholesterol then. And I want to share with you some kind of new thinking about this because clearly cholesterol is related to a risk factor for heart disease. But cholesterol in and of itself is not dangerous. It's when it gets oxidized that it's a problem. And that's a problem because most Americans are not eating a natural diet, the kind of diet that is essential for human bodies are the foods that grow out of the earth naturally, the fruits and especially the vegetables. And so an ideal diet should have about 6 to 9 vegetables a day. Then you get lots and lots of good antioxidants so that without that, if you oxidize that cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol turns into something that's like plaque in your arteries, and that's what leads to hardening of the arteries, arteriosclerosis, and so on. So there are a number of nutrients that help to reduce oxidation, or the antioxidants, vitamin C, vitamin E, carotenoids and flavonoids. So let's understand where cholesterol comes from. 2/3 of it is produced by your body. It's produced in the liver, and what triggers the liver to produce that cholesterol is saturated fats and or trans fats, which luckily we're starting to see a real reduction of now in the American diet, and lack of dietary fiber, number 2, but one of the big ones is insulin. Insulin that is stimulated whenever we eat sweets and refined carbs. So our addiction to those foods, and it is an addiction, they now understand that gluten in particular, but also sugars and these refined carbohydrates, they bind with opiate receptors in our brains, and they cause us to crave these kinds of foods. So I always like people to know that, because we sometimes can get down on ourselves and be very self-critical about our willpower. It's not a willpower issue. This is an issue that has to do with addiction and getting our body back in balance. Click. So I want to just give you a quick overview about some of the new thinking about cholesterol. Some of it comes from a very new book called Grain Brain. Some of you are familiar with Wheat Belly. We've talked about that book before that was written by a cardiologist. Brain Brain, on the other hand, was written by a neurologist, David Perlmutter. And he has a chapter in which he talks about cholesterol. And he said, you know, as a neurologist, understand that cholesterol is essential for proper brain function. And low levels of cholesterol have been associated with increased risk for neurological diseases, including Parkinson's disease. So he said, you don't want to get your cholesterol so low that it begins to diminish your brain function. Now, that is not something that we normally hear. And so he said the LDL cholesterol is not necessarily the enemy. It's the carbs and the free radicals that oxidize them that is. Can we click, Joe? And so I pulled just a couple of quick quotes and stats for you about refined carbs are a greater threat to heart disease than fats, and some of you may have been hearing this. Certainly, Perlmutter talks about this as well. But one of the studies that was done at Harvard fairly recently in postmenopausal women found that the women who ate more saturated fat had less disease progression than those who were eating the refined carbohydrates. In another one, the risk of heart attack was higher in patients who switched to refined carbs instead of eating saturated fat. So understand that more and more fingers are pointing at the dangers of the refined carbs. Click, Joan. And yet, in the pharmaceutical world and in the medical world, there is a tremendous focus on cholesterol. And as a pharmacist, Rusty, you may want to comment on this because there are huge financial implications in this, right, for pharmaceutical companies. But just be aware that this is a very recent figure from the CDC, 25% of people over the age of 45 are on statin drugs. That's 36 million people. And because of some new guidelines that have just recently been issued from the American Heart Association, that number is expected to double to 72 million, which would be 30%. And so it's a tremendous number of people on cholesterol drugs. So we wanted to at least give you some of both sides of that argument so that you can make a decision for yourself. Click. And so one of the other books I read is called The Great Cholesterol Myth, Why Lowering Your Cholesterol Will Not Prevent Heart Disease, but a Statin-Free Plan That Will. And so this was another study that showed all these other factors that increase the risk for coronary events, smoking, obesity, poor diet, excessive alcohol, lack of exercise, but not high cholesterol. Okay, click, Joe. Now, a little bit about statin drugs, and Mr. Pharmacist, feel free to jump in here whenever you feel like it, is that I think it is accepted that it stabilizes plaque, right, Rusty? It is a bit of a blood thinner, but then so is omega-3 fatty acids that Rusty was just talking about. And it is anti-inflammatory, but then so are omega-3 fatty acids and GLA, the omega-6 that Rusty mentioned.
I want to say something.
Please speak.
I don't like the fact that the CDC and the medical community call omega-3 a blood thinner. It's not. It's a blood slicker. As opposed to the warfarin products, which are blood thinners, as are the statins. Statins interfere with the blood clotting process the same way that Coumadin does. Omega-3 fatty acids do not interfere with the blood clotting process. They just make the blood cells slicker.
Good point.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I am going to make a slide about that. I'm making notes, Rusty. That
Good
is
point.
see that is something that people need to know, because they sure are not getting that from the medical profession. Okay, click, Joe.
Did you do this? This is important what's here, Barbara, about statins don't do much for primary prevention for people who do not have existing heart disease.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're generally healthy, your only symptom is high cholesterol. You probably don't need a statin or any other cholesterol-lowering drug.
Amen. Okay, so side effects of statin, which is the part that really concerns me, is that I'm not sure people are aware. All drugs have toxic side effects. Rusty can tell you that. But the way statins work is they block enzymes that are produced in the liver, and this enzyme, one of the ones it blocks, is the one that produces cholesterol when insulin levels are high. Now, when I did this program with Dr. Steve Cheney about a year ago, and he was saying, generally that's a good thing, but they also block the production of coenzyme Q10, and that's a bad thing, because that's essential for energy and for the cardiovascular health of all your cells, and especially your heart. Your brain is very much affected by it. And so CoQ10 is considered something that boosts heart function. It repairs heart damage. It protects against congestive heart failure, and it's very important for cognitive function. And statin drugs, that's one of the side effects, is memory loss or confusion. Digestive problems are not uncommon, even increases risk for diabetes. Anything you want to mention there, Rusty?
Later.
Okay, click. But the most serious side effect of statins, according to Dr. Steve Cheney, biochemist, he said, is muscle pain and weakness, because if that is ignored, it can cause kidney failure. So be aware, because a very high percentage of Americans over the age of 65, 86%, are prescribed statin drugs. Click. Okay, Rusty.
Okay, so what can we do about it diet-wise? We know we're supposed to eat right, but you read statistics all the time that only 3% of the people in the United States eat a balanced diet for more than one day in a row. And all of these things, it's just very, very difficult. Our lifestyle doesn't allow that. Those of us who are in Shackley are probably well aware of it, and I'm not sure that we're even really good at it. But the first step toward a healthier heart is, of course, Vitalizer, because, as Dr. Shackley said, if we eat a smorgasbord, the body will take what it needs. And this is truly a smorgasbord of 80 different bio-optimized nutrients. 26 of them are antioxidants, and we're talking about inflammation and stuff. And so 26 of them antioxidants. The best part of Vitalizer, for my money, is the delivery system, the smart delivery system that takes each one of those 80 nutrients to the exact place in the body at the exact time for optimal absorption and utilization. And so that delivery system, that smart delivery system in a package of Vitalizer strips costs more to produce than an entire bottle of Centrum vitamins. Just the delivery system. So it is a very good value. To go along with that, it's in the Shackley Lean and Healthy kit. So if a person doesn't feel like they need to lose weight, or maybe they've gone on the 180 smoothies and have lost the weight that they want, now they're in maintenance, this is great, because you cannot downplay the value of soy protein in the prevention and treatment of heart disease. And so this is the finest soy that you can get, non-GMO, contains all of the essential amino acids as well as the non-essentials, has that extra leucine that Joe talked about that promotes muscle growth, and so it's really good. And of course, economically, once again, it's good for the 3 for Free program.
Mm-hmm.
Next.
Click.
Okay. There are ways that you can reduce cholesterol naturally. I'm proof of that. Daily cardiovascular exercise, particularly weight-bearing exercise, is very good. Achieving and maintaining ideal body weight, we've covered. Diets low in refined carbohydrates, just because that makes sense, and it reduces the demand for insulin that Barb's talking about. No better way than the energizing soy shakes and the 180 smoothies. I just can't say enough about it. Cholesterol reduction is quite an interesting product because it's an example of physical science and how it works in the body, because all living things have sterols. In plants, they're called phytosterols, and in animals, they're called cholesterol. And so they are very similar structurally. And so when you flood your receptors with phytosterols, you in effect block the absorption of the cholesterols, the cholesterol, that you consume. But, Barb said that 2/3 of our cholesterol is produced by our own body. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I remember it.
The interesting thing about cholesterol reduction complex is that it works against the exogenous cholesterol, that cholesterol that's in the cow you eat. And by the way, plants don't have cholesterol, only animals. So if you are a vegetarian, you still have cholesterol, but it's because your body makes it. It's essential for life. The problem is the body never makes just enough. It always makes a little extra. And so the cholesterol reduction complex also works against endogenous cholesterol. So when your body produces that cholesterol, the plant stanols and sterols that are in cholesterol reduction complex effectively block that endogenous cholesterol from being absorbed also.
And you just take a couple of tablets before your meal?
You take 2. I'll tell you what I do. I take 2 before any time I eat anything with cholesterol. If I'm eating a salad, I don't. But I always take 4 a day. Just because of that endogenous cholesterol, because obviously my body makes way more than it needs. And so
sure.
It does that, and we anyway, so that's I always take at least 4 a day, but and I seldom take more than 4 because I hardly ever eat 3 meals that have cholesterol. But anyway, that's about that. The next slide, the CoQ Heart, that's probably one of the most important and least understood products that we have, because as our bodies age, and Barbara, you noted that 86% of people over 65 are taking statins, and so as we age, our bodies lose the ability to manufacture our own coenzyme Q10. And actually, by the age of 80, and a significant number of people are living to that age, at age 80, the amount of coenzyme Q10 in a person's body is lower than it was at their birth. And so it's so essential for all of these bodily functions, and we don't have any. And so I'm going to kind of I guess, okay, well, let's take a look. Reduce the risk for congestive heart failure, prevents, the big deal is it prevents the oxidation of LDL. LDL isn't what kills you. What kills you is that LDL gets oxidized to plaque. And so, it also reduces platelet aggregation, and it says here statin users reported a 40% decrease in statin-induced muscle pain after 100 milligrams of coenzyme Q10 for 30 days. Any statin user that has statin-induced muscle pain ought to be off of it, not taking CoQ Heart to get rid of the muscle pain. Go to the next page. And so the thing about that I want people to understand is that Shaklee's CoQ Heart is specially made because it's a really difficult molecule because it's so big. Plus, it likes to aggregate in the stomach so that it gets too big to be absorbed. And Shaklee's is manufactured in such a way that the molecular size stays small, it gets absorbed, but our own government, the National Institute of Health, recommends up to, get this, 2,400 milligrams of coenzyme Q10 a day.
Wow.
For particular
2,400?
diseases. 2,400. And that's part of that is because the National Institute of Health hasn't heard about Shaklee yet. And so they're
because
trying
they know it doesn't get absorbed.
Right. And so they're saying, but generally people, 100 milligrams is generally not enough if you have any issue with any kind of a heart thing at all. And if you go to the next page, maybe that's,
there you
I don't know what page you're on.
Yeah, it's okay. We're there.
All right. So people on statin drugs, okay, 86% of the people over 65 need to be on CoQ10.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because it's artificially lowering their already lowered coenzyme Q10. In addition to that, people who have heart disease, the drug of choice for blood pressure are the beta blockers. And for other issues in the body also, but beta blockers to reduce blood pressure and to control heart rates and in arrhythmias and all kinds of things. Well, beta blockers are another drug class that preferentially cause a lowering of coenzyme Q10 in the body.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so
Great.
Alzheimer's, cardiomyopathies, all of these things, I think that if a person has something, they ought to be taking at least 300 milligrams of Shaklee a day.
Sure.
CoQ, Shaklee CoQ.
CoQ Heart.
CoQ Heart. Okay,
Right.
got it.
With Q-Trol, which is the resveratrol, I mean, our product is so much better. It's like not even having a second place. But when the National Institute of Health says that people with certain diseases ought to be taking 2.4 grams, that's 24 capsules. I want those people to get it from me because that's high PV.
Yeah.
But I understand that it crystallizes. I remember them telling us that when that came out. That was quite a breakthrough that Shaklee had, and to achieve that naturally without using harsh chemicals to prevent the crystallization. Click ahead. There you go. Rusty, talk to us about Vivix, because I know that's another really important one.
Well, the best thing we can say about Vivix is the last statement on the page, Barbara, and that is that as of recently, Shaklee now has a clinical study documenting the reduction of inflammation in the body for people who consume Vivix. And it's so important, and we all know that it works at the cellular level against the 4 major causes of aging that are in the body. But the aging, nobody wants to get older, okay? But the fact that we can lower triglycerides, we can raise HDL, lower LDL, that's what causes aging, and so and inflammation. And so it's just a really great product. and it ought to be in everybody's nutritional regimen.
Click.
Good point.
And so, Rusty, you mentioned blood pressure, and I should have gotten some statistics about how many people are on blood pressure medication, but it's a high number. And there are a number of nutrients and exercise and other things that we can do that will naturally lower blood pressure. So I just like people to know there's some people who have genetic issues around blood pressure, but to as much of the natural things as you can use, then to help contribute to lowering that, then even if you do need a medication, maybe you don't need quite so much. So you're not exposed to all the side effects of meds. So garlic is one, coenzyme Q10, Vivix that Rusty just mentioned, magnesium. Shaklee Vital Mag is a very nice magnesium product because 80% of the population is low in magnesium. And that one is a sustained release of magnesium, so it doesn't have a laxative effect. B vitamins, very important. And B vitamins are depleted by stress and caffeine and nicotine, all of which contribute to high blood pressure. And then Omega Guard that Rusty talked about earlier. Want to click, Joe? And then, Rusty, talk about that just real quick.
Well, you mentioned every drug has side effects. Guess what nutritional supplements and Shaklee herbal remedies have? They have side benefits. And so that's the place people should be starting with. That should, like in third world countries, and not even third world countries, in places like Germany and England and places in Europe where herbal products are the drug of choice. And only when they don't work, and there are instances when people need drugs. There's no question about it.
Yeah, sure.
But they shouldn't start with that. Right. If people have high cholesterol, they shouldn't start with a statin. But that's how people get paid. So
go ahead, Joe. Click through. Go ahead. Yeah.
So just to kind of summarize in terms of what a healthy heart does need, lots of antioxidants. We can get them from our diet if we're eating enough fruits and especially vegetables, but then vitalizer, that's guaranteed delivery. Omega-3 fatty acids also can come from the diet if we're eating enough, seafood, flaxseed, walnuts, things like that. Guaranteed if we take vitalizer and Omega Guard. And of course, CoQ10 to prevent congestive heart failure, particularly if you are on statins. Vivix to do just about everything else that's good for your heart, and exercise is a critical component, and healthy weight with the Shaklee 180 weight loss plan.
We pretty much have talked about all of these, I think, sufficiently, but that little box at the bottom, the best science, the best ingredients, the best delivery systems, the best protein, the best cholesterol products, the best program, nobody else has that.
That's right.
The end, right. And so Rusty, would you share then the rest of your story? So 10 years ago, you had this quadruple bypass with, terrible news about how seriously damaged and blocked all the arteries were. Now we're, 14 years out from there. Tell us what happened then.
Yeah, we are 14 years. We're 13 years and 11 months. It's kind of funny. We remember days like that. It was March 6th of 2000. Anyway, 10 years after that, and you have to remember that the doctor told me 25% of my heart was dead. He told me that I don't handle stress, and I hollered at him. And he said, if you go back to work, I'll give you 2 years to live. And therein lies the true value of a Shaklee business. We never know what it's worth until something like this happens, and we had the luxury of me saying, well, that's fine, I won't go back to work. I was doing it because I liked it, not because I had to. And so anyway, 10 years after that, I go to my cardiologist, and he does the same 2 tests that I had before my heart surgery. He does the echocardiogram, and he does the cardiolite stress test. And the echocardiogram showed that 100% of my heart is alive, well, and beating. and the cardiolite stress test documented that 100% of my heart has sufficient blood flow.
Wow.
And so we can rebuild anything but the brain. We can rebuild. And I tell people, shoot, 10 years, I have a new heart.
Yeah.
It's sure better than my old one, and I didn't have to have a transplant.
Yeah, that is really a fascinating story to share with people, that we are learning that the body is capable of amazing healing and amazing regeneration of cells. Even the heart can do that. I just think that is the good news about this, is that start wherever you are, whatever the condition is, whatever your heart history is, whatever your family history is, start with a basic program and begin making those changes in our diet, begin tucking in our exercise programs, bringing in more vegetables into our diet, reducing the carbs, the sugar, the refined stuff, and it's amazing. And then, give it a year and see where your blood tests go. It'll be wonderful. Go ahead, Joe. You want to tell them how to contact you?
Yeah. For people that may want to have a consultation with Rusty and or June, they're a husband and wife team, both pharmacists, both extremely knowledgeable people and very, very caring. So they're excellent resources. You can call 239-945-3423 to set up a consultation time, and they also have a website. Is that a website? No,
email address.
Email, phytobites@yahoo.com. So if you or someone has some health issues, it does not have to be about the heart. It can be in any arena of a health issue. You may want to use either Rusty and or June for consultation. Like I said, they're great resources.
Okay, that was just
CDC
some notes.
does this.
Yeah, that was some notes from the CDC that I saw. That I was just looking real quickly, Joe, at some of the questions that people were asking. Let's see. I heard medical doctors are now requiring that borderline people with cardio issues need to take statins for health insurance coverage. Is this correct? Do you know, Rusty?
I would almost guarantee you that it's not correct, only because we haven't gotten to the point in this country yet where patients do not have a choice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A customer who had heart attack has been told that ubiquinol alone is preferable to Shaklee CoQ Heart. Can you speak about this?
That's another name for coenzyme Q10.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that Shaklee's coenzyme Q10 or ubiquinone is so much better absorbed that it's the ubiquinone that has this huge molecule that can't be absorbed. And
would that be obtained through prescription?
No, it's just another name for.
Oh, okay.
It's the scientific name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So why would they say that?
Ibuprofen and Motrin.
Well, I think companies do that, to try to sell their product. There's a ubiquinone and a ubiquinol, isn't it, Rusty? We should get our biochemist in here to talk us about that. I'll make a note and we'll bring him in for the next conversation regarding that. Beta blockers, that was the beta blockers are a medication that are often given for high blood pressure medication. Someone was asking, and so that's what Rusty was talking about when we were talking about high blood pressure, and that they too reduce the body's production of CoQ10.
Do you take one CoQ Heart with Vitalizer Gold? Yeah.
Yeah, Rusty thinks you should take more, but
depends on. Oh, that sounds like Barbara Lagoni. It depends.
It depends.
But it does depend. If you have my heart and my body, then you take more than one. Other people, I'm not saying everyone needs to take 300 milligrams a day. But it depends on age and medical history and family history and all of those things.
And Joanne Webb said her mom, or was it Jeff? Anyway, either Jeff Whitaker or Joanne, I can't tell. Whitaker. Oh, Jeff, okay. Said that his mom had a heart attack 6 years ago with 60% blockage in her carotid artery, and using the Vitalizer Gold and Vivix, she has no more blockage, and the bottom of her heart that was dead is now functioning. Oh, it sounds like you, Rusty. Yeah. And that also was true with Ray DeBrincat. I remember them saying that his heart had figured out new ways to reroute the blood and to heal, create new healthy cells again where the old cells had died. Oh, this is good. All right, any other quick questions? I'm looking real quick, Joe.
Where can we access these slides?
They'll be at my 31 betterhealthin31days.com.
Rusty, how important is potassium in lowering blood pressure?
Potassium?
It's not. I mean, potassium
is replaced from the medication.
Is critical. Potassium is critical for muscle contraction, and interestingly, one of the things the ACE inhibitors do, I don't remember that slide, is it increases potassium to the point of causing liver problems, and so because potassium is such a critical element. It has to be regulated, and some blood pressure medicines preferentially excrete potassium, and so the physician will put them on a potassium supplement to make up for it. Others, like the ACE inhibitors, cause increased potassium, so people have to eliminate tomatoes and bananas and a lot of foods from their diet that have extra potassium because they have too much, and because their liver isn't getting rid of it.
There's a lovely message here from Kristen Jakubowski, who thanking you, Rusty, for this information. She said that today would have been her father's 67th birthday, but unfortunately he was one of those people that the first symptom was death, and he died at 64, age 64. Wow. He had just been to a doctor for a full physical only 2 weeks prior to his sudden death. Wow. Gosh, thank you for that, Kristen, because it's a good reminder. She said, this was a wonderful homage to him, and if this helps even one person, he would have loved it. Sorry,
here's someone says, my dad will be having surgery on his carotid artery that is 70% blocked. They want him on statins after surgery, but he has been fighting against it. He has used Shackley for over 37 years.
Is there a question?
Well, yes. The question is, does he have to take it?
Yeah. Well, the answer is absolutely not. And the thing you have to do is that you can't make your doctor so mad he won't see you any longer.
Right.
So you have to work with the physician, and you don't do that by, offending him or her. And so what works for an awful lot of people is that they'll say, okay, I understand that you want me to do this. Would you give me the latitude of trying to do it without a statin for 6 months? And see. And if in 6 months it's bad, well, then you have to figure out what to do. But on the other hand, if you control it, then the doctor's going to say, wow, I don't know what you're doing, but you should keep doing it.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Because many people hear that from their physician.
Right.
Sure. And you're scared, and so, I really don't, I'm not opposed to medications. I don't think any of us are. It's just that medications will never be a substitute for good natural health from doing those things that are really healthy and natural for our bodies. And so when using medications for short-term purposes after someone has had, some kind of a major illness or major surgery, even that is fine. Like taking a blood thinner after surgery, I mean, that's not a bad thing. It's when you're on it for years and years and years and you're given a medication that's treating a symptom but never addresses the cause. That's where I feel people need to be given options, choices. Mm-hmm. So, oh my gosh, I know. Thank you all for your comments. They're wonderful. And thank you, Rusty. We've kept you much longer than we normally do, but this has really been timely, and it affects so many people. So many of us have family members that have had heart disease, and it's just wonderful to have some really proactive things that we can be about regarding that. So thanks, everybody. Next week, what are we talking about next week, Joe? Pregnancy and infertility. We're talking about next week. That'll be good. And then on the 24th, I think we're talking about detox. But no, that's good. I don't know what we're talking about. Whatever it is, we'll let you know. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great week.
See you next week. Thank you, Rusty.
Thank you, Rusty. That was great.
We got to have you come for a visit again.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.